All right, welcome back, guys. Today, Unit 9, Spanish-American War to World War I. So this is going to be part 1, and it's only going to be talking about the Spanish-American War. We'll get to World War I next class. So remember, you can pause as needed because I'm going to go faster than I would normally in class. All right, so as a result of the Spanish-American War, the United States was recognized as a world power. So in our lifetime, we're used to the United States being the world power, but that wasn't always the case because if you remember earlier in the year, everything's about England, Spain, France, etc. And the Monroe Doctrine, we don't want them to come over here to the Western Hemisphere, etc. So now we are becoming the world power, and the Spanish-American War is really what kind of does that. So I realize many of you may not have ever even heard of the Spanish-American War. So what is it? Basically, it's a conflict between Spain and the United States that ended Spain's colonial presence in the Western Hemisphere. A lot of big vocabulary words there for a few of you. Just kidding. But anyway, you get it. The colonial presence. Remember, America started off as colonies. Now, Spain and again, other countries are still colonizing. And we have said because of the Monroe Doctrine, don't come over here. We don't want you here. So the Spanish-American War started with a mysterious explosion that sank the United States battleship, the Maine, which was harbored in Cuba, protecting revolutionaries trying to win independence from Spain. So in Cuba, they want to be their own country instead of a colony of Spain. So the United States, we would prefer that they're their own country so we can have better relations with them directly because they're so close to us. Cuba's only 90 miles away, and that's going to become a really big deal later in the year when we get to the Cold War. So you guys remember the Mexican-American War, well, before that, where the Alamo was such a big deal and you had the saying, remember the Alamo. Well, now we have the saying, remember the Maine. So what you're looking at on the screen, that is the remains of the battleship, the Maine, named after the state Maine. And we thought that it was an act of terrorism, that someone planted a bomb on the ship. Crazy thing is, you know how good technology is today. In modern times, they've gone back and analyzed the wreckage and they looked at other issues, and it turns out a boiler blew up. It was not an act of terrorism. So we go into this whole war on the basis that this was purposely done against us when it honestly was just a defective piece of a ship that blew up and would have blown up even if it was in the United States. So it was kind of a crazy circumstance. So this unit is really short, and I could have easily put it all together in one video, but we're going to kind of drag it out into two because there's some other activities that you're going to do. But anyway, so what's the whole result of the Spanish-American War? So Latin America. Puerto Rico was annexed by the United States. Now, I ask you in the sheet, you need to remember, what does annexed mean? We talked about that with Texas, and you're going to see that word over and over. So if you can't remember what it means, you need to look it up and type it on your packet. The United States asserted its right to intervene in Cuban affairs. I also ask you in that, and I'm going to leave it for you to think about, why do you think the United States cared so much about Cuba? And I want you to just do your best, and I'll see who answered and who didn't, you know. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Why do you think Cuba is such a big deal to the United States? All right, so if you look at this map, I know everyone sees the Gulf of Mexico and you see Florida. Well, literally 90 miles to the south of Florida is the big island of Cuba. And then you have Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, etc., all through the Caribbean islands. But anyway, Cuba is very close to the United States, as you can see from the map right there. And we go through some really hard times with them during the Cold War, which we'll talk about. I'm sure you've heard of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but that'll be fun. That's one of the best units of the year. But again, that's the whole issue. Cuba is very close to us, and again, we'll deal with a lot of things over time through that. All right, so next up we have the Panama Canal and the role of Theodore Roosevelt, or Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt's pretty famous. He's on Mount Rushmore, and if you didn't know, the reason he's on Mount Rushmore is because he single-handedly defeated Cuba. He went one-man commando and just defeated them. Well, not really. He's there because he invented basically the national park system, and that's still a real big deal. He was an avid outdoorsman. He even wrote in a book about an encounter with Bigfoot, which is pretty interesting. But anyway, the United States encouraged Panama's independence from Colombia. The parties negotiated a treaty to build the canal. So what is the significance of the Panama Canal? Well, I'll explain it here when we look at these pictures. So if you look at the top left, so imagine a container ship from New York City has to take something all the way to San Francisco. You wouldn't want to go by train because if it's too much, like think of those big car container ships that we have today. So the red line goes all the way down the tip of South America and back up. But what happens because of the Panama Canal, it's a shortcut, as you can see, the smaller red line that cuts literally through Central America. So it saves millions and millions of dollars and time. Time is the big thing because remember, when you're in business, you need to get things done quickly. The quicker you can get it done, the quicker you get your money. So if we move over to the picture on the right, the top right, you can see where the canal kind of goes from the Caribbean Sea to the Pacific Ocean. So literally it's going from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Now there's a lot of details you're going to hear about. You're going to be watching a video about the building of the Panama Canal and some of the issues, as well as a brief assignment about how many people died, issues that they had, etc. Now the canal is not one canal going all the way across the land right there. There's other waterways, as you can see on the bottom picture. So what they had to do is they had to create locks, which is a system of raising and lowering ships, which you'll see in the video, but I'll show you a picture here in a second. So when you're looking at the natural waterways and then you look at this picture here, those are man-made locks. Now, what happens is the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean are not the same height. So literally as you're traveling across Panama, you're literally having to raise the ships up or lower them depending on which direction they're going. So ultimately, if you see there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 little areas. So what happens is the ship gets pushed in and then the water is raised up and then they get to the next one, then they're raised up again, etc. I want to say I looked previously at how much this costs. This is very expensive for ships to go through, but it's worthwhile because it's such a shortcut. It saves them fuel, it saves them time, etc. And that there's not just one series of locks, there's multiple, but the video that you're going to be doing a little assignment on, it's going to show you exactly how it works in fast time. They'll speed it up so you can see how it looks. It's pretty crazy. So this is another picture here. As you can see how the height changes. So if you were in a ship closest to the screen, you would be going forward, and you see that where that little white truck is, well, that's going to have to get out of the way. But ultimately the water is going to rise up and then those doors will open, then you'll go forward and you can see how it keeps rising. That's what I was talking about. So it's literally lifting the ships up as it goes. Now, if you look to the left, there's a ship coming in the opposite direction. So it's going to be lowered until it gets down to the lower level. Pretty fascinating, to be honest. It's severe engineering. Like whoever came up with that's pretty crazy. We have locks like this in America as well in different areas. I've seen YouTube videos, people just like pleasure boating, that type of thing with their yachts and stuff, going through different locks to get from one place to another, but sometimes like in smaller areas as well. All right, next we have Latin America, the Roosevelt Corollary. So this is something that always turns up on the SOLs or the benchmarks, etc. What does the word corollary mean? So I'm going to explain it this way. A corollary is a reinforcement of something that already exists. And the best way that I can explain it to you is, that in Hampton City Schools / Bethel High School, you're not allowed to leave the building to go to lunch. Some people do. Imagine if we had some type of problem and they basically made a new reinforcement of the already existing rule that if you were caught leaving, you were expelled. You just can't come back. You're going to have to go to school in another city. It's going to cost your parents all this money. So that would be called Dr. Howard's corollary. She's not making a new rule. She's basically reinforcing a rule that already exists, maybe reinforcing it a little tougher, whatever the case may be. I don't see something like that happening, but I'm just trying to put that in a way that you can understand that. So what the Roosevelt corollary is, he's reinforcing the Monroe Doctrine. He feels like it wasn't enforced enough, so he's re-emphasizing this Monroe Doctrine that, hey, Europe, don't come over here, don't colonize, we want to be left alone. And the last part of that is, what is a police presence? And that's in quotes. It's literally saying that America is going to enforce these laws that we're watching and we're not going to stand by and do nothing about it. So a police presence is more or less like, well, imagine how it is in the schools. Since we've had an issue, now everybody's guarding the doors, etc. All right, next, Asia and the Pacific. So Hawaii, United States efforts to depose Hawaii's monarchy. Yeah, Hawaii had a king and queen, and we'll talk about that in a separate assignment. How, did we get rid of them? Depose means to get rid of. And I have mentioned it in a few classes, why we did, et cetera, what were the benefits, why the United States wanted Hawaii. But anyway, the United States, and here's that word again, annexed Hawaii. Then we have the Philippines, annexed after the Spanish-American War. So again, another time that we're using the word annexed. Then we have Guam, once again, annexed after the Spanish-American War. So for all three of those, Hawaii, Philippines, and Guam, this is kind of this result of the Spanish-American War and the United States gaining and becoming more powerful. We're picking up these territories that all have specific uses for us. For example, Hawaii becomes one of our most important military bases. Same with the Philippines and Guam. These are all places that, when we get to World War II, they're all going to have prominent roles in that. Then last, we have what's called the open door policy. It urged all foreigners in China to obey Chinese law, observe fair competition. So we'll talk about that separately when I get back. I don't want to get into that because you won't remember, but this slide is important because these are things that tend to be on the CSAs, benchmarks, etc., and SOLs for those of you that need to take it. So for these two maps, I'm not going to really dwell on them a lot in the video, but you can pause it and take a look, see if you can find Guam, the Philippines, etc. But basically, we'll talk about these more as we go. So if you didn't notice, if you see Japan up at the top left of the map, if you go straight down from there, you can see the Philippines. That also becomes a big issue during World War II as well, which we have a little ways to go to get there. All right, and finally, we have racial conflict in the Spanish-American War and in the Philippines. So African-American soldiers and sailors eagerly enlisted to fight, but were kept in segregated units. So again, you understand what segregated units are. It's all black units. Again, we're going to see that again in World War II. Not a lot has changed racially. Yes, there's no more slavery, but in the South you still have Jim Crow laws, etc. So we're going to be talking more about that. And then also the long fight against the Filipinos after the American arrival was often interpreted in the United States as a struggle between white and colored peoples. So this is, again, with the United States, we just constantly are having racial issues, whether it's Native Americans, African Americans, now other people of color, Hispanic, etc., Filipino, Asian, and that's going to really blow up when we get to World War II. And again, I've mentioned that several times in class, that World War II really becomes a racial war on all sides, not just Americans, but the Japanese are racist towards everyone else. The Nazis are obviously racist towards everyone else. And America, we have racial issues here in the United States, but then because we're attacked by Japan, it becomes a racial thing as well, which, again, we'll get that later. We still have a couple units to go. World War II is going to be a really big deal, and a lot of you will love that. So the next video for next class, we'll focus on World War I. And I know y'all are probably tired of doing the notes and all this way, but like I said, I'll be back soon, very soon. I'm doing good. But basically, we have 3 movies to watch. So you're going to have kind of this break before Christmas and even after Christmas, because remember, we have until the 3rd week of January until the exams. And then we start the 2nd semester, which is absolutely awesome. So anyway, just get this done. Remember, I will not be accepting late work. Anything that's not submitted, you will not have the opportunity to make it up. No excuses. All right. Thank you and see you next class.